When I refused to sign over the house Grandpa left me, my family invited me to a talk. My sister smiled and said, "It's only fair we all benefit." My brother nodded. I took out a copy of the will and said, "Then I guess you haven't read this part. Let me set the scene for you. I-27F wasn't supposed to get the house. That's what everyone thought. For as long as I can remember, our family revolved around two things: appearances and entitlement. My sister Melanie 33F is a social media momfluencer with 2 kids and a husband she barely tolerates. My brother Zach 31M is a real estate entrepreneur who hasn't sold a single property in 2 years, but somehow always has new shoes and the latest iPhone. And then there's me. The quiet one. The one who moved out at 19 and never looked back. The one who actually spent time with Grandpa. Grandpa wasn't like the rest of the family. He built the house we all grew up visiting by hand in the 70s with money he saved working 2 jobs. It was a modest craftsman home tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing fancy, but solid. Full of history. Full of him. When Grandma passed, Grandpa lived there alone. Everyone stopped visiting. Except me. I drive down once a month, mow the lawn, fix little things around the place, and sit with him for coffee and chess. He taught me how to repair the gutters and patch drywall. He told me stories about how he installed the brick fireplace by himself with nothing but a level, determination, and a bad back. We never really talked feelings, but I knew he saw me. I think he understood that I didn't fit in with the rest of them and didn't want to. He died last year. Peacefully. In his sleep. The funeral was a parade of crocodile tears. Melanie brought matching black dresses for her kids and made them pose for pictures beside the casket. Zach gave a speech that was 90% about himself. Mom sobbed dramatically while whispering to people how she was basically his caregiver. She wasn't. I stood off to the side, holding the only thing I took from his house that day, a Polaroid of us in front of the porch, dated 1999, with my 7-year-old self sitting on his lap, both of us covered in paint and grinning like fools. A week later, the will was read. Everyone assumed the house would be split 3 ways, if not go to my mom outright. She practically laughed when the lawyer said, "To my granddaughter Emily, I leave the house, the land it sits on, and full rights to do with it as she pleases." She's the only one who came around. The only one who helped. She earned it. I swear the silence in the room was so sharp, I could hear my sister blink. Melanie tried to protest. Zach was already Googling ways to contest a will. My mom demanded we have a family discussion about what Grandpa really would have wanted. But legally? That house was mine. They tried to play nice for a bit. Lots of, "We're just looking out for you, and we could turn it into a vacation. Rental and split the income." But when I told them I planned to move in, fix it up and actually live there, that's when they scheduled the talk. It was framed like a casual family lunch. Neutral location. Dad's old cabin by the lake. I knew something was up when I pulled into the gravel lot and saw Zach's Tesla, Melanie's blacked-out Escalade, and a U-Haul parked nearby. A U-Haul. They didn't even try to hide it. The moment I walked in, Melanie gave me this practice smile, the same one she uses in every thumbnail on her channel, and said, "So glad you could make it, Em. We've been talking. We think it's only fair we all benefit from Grandpa's house." Zach nodded beside her, arms crossed like he was laying down some kind of law. "You wouldn't even have that house if it weren't for us. That was the family home." I didn't say a word. Just pulled out a folded, highlighted copy of the will from my purse, laid it flat on the coffee table, and pointed to the paragraph they obviously hadn't read or pretended not to. "To my granddaughter Emily and Emily only, I leave the house, the land, and the contents within." I looked up. "So, unless you guys have a Ouija board and a pretty convincing argument, I'm gonna go ahead and assume Grandpa meant what he said." They stared at me like I'd smacked them. But I wasn't done. "Also, whose idea was the U-Haul?" That's when Melanie's smile cracked. Zach had the nerve to speak first. He gestured toward the U-Haul outside like I was the one being irrational. "We figured we'd help you clear it out. You know, sort through Grandpa's stuff together. Sell what we don't need. Put some of that money to good use." "Good use," Melanie echoed, like she was on cue. "We've both got families, Emily. Expenses. And you? You're single. You don't even need a whole house. I looked at her, stunned. So let me get this straight. Because I don't have a husband or kids, I don't deserve to live in the house I inherited? Zach cut in before she could reply. That's not what she meant. Actually, it is, I said flatly. Melanie shifted gears, trying the guilt route. We grew up there too, Em. That place is full of our childhood. Of memories. It doesn't belong to just one person. I leaned back in the creaky wooden chair, eyeing the U-Haul through the cabin window. You mean the house you haven't set foot in for 6 years? The one you called a dump in front of Grandpa the last time you visited. Her eyes widened. That's not fair. No, you're right, I said, reaching into my bag again. What is fair is what's written in black and white. I slapped a second copy of the will down on the table. Page 3, line 6. I leave no rights to the property to any other member of my family, and I do so without regret. Zach rolled his eyes and stood up. Look, Em, we're trying to be civil. You don't want this to get messy. Is that a threat? It's a fact, he said coolly. You don't want to alienate your whole family over this. Melanie gave me that same soft, patronizing tone she uses when one of her kids throws a tantrum. Be reasonable, Em. You could sign it over to all 3 of us and we'd put it in a trust. Use it for vacations, holidays, split profits if we Airbnb it. It's fair, you're being. What? Greedy. I stood now, slowly, letting the chair scrape the floor. You all had years to show up for Grandpa, and you didn't. You had years to call, visit, bring him groceries, fix the leaky sink. You didn't. You left it to me. I was the one there every winter when the heat broke. I was the one who shoveled the walk after every storm. I was the one who sat with him in the hospital when he fell and broke his hip. I stepped forward. And you're damn right, I'm keeping that house. The room fell silent. Even Zach stopped pacing. I grabbed the copies of the will from the table, folded them back into my bag, and walked to the door. My hand was on the handle when Melanie said softly, You know, Mom's not gonna forgive you for this. I turned back. She stopped forgiving me for things I didn't do years ago. I think I'll survive. I opened the door, took one last look at the U-Haul, still parked smugly in the gravel, and added, Tell the movers not to bother. If I see them on the property, I'll have them removed. And don't test me, I've already spoken to a lawyer. Zach called out as I walked to my car, This isn't over. I didn't look back. Good, I muttered to myself. I'm just getting started. I thought that would be the end of it. I had been clear, direct, and firm. The house was mine. There was a legal will. I even followed up with a lawyer just in case, had a letter drafted that reiterated my sole ownership, and emailed it to every member of my family. But entitled people don't hear boundaries. They hear invitations to escalate. It started small. I'd come by the house after work and find the front gate wide open, even though I always locked it. A few garden tools were missing from the shed. One time, the lockbox for the spare key was pried open, the key gone. I changed the locks that same day, installed a Ring camera the next, added motion detectors inside and started staying there more regularly, sleeping on an air mattress while I painted the upstairs bedroom and slowly cleaned out Grandpa's things. Then came the break-in. It was a Sunday morning, early April. I drove up after spending the night at my apartment, planning to finish sanding the floors in the den. As soon as I turned the corner onto the cul-de-sac, I knew something was off. The blinds were drawn in the front room. Grandpa never closed those blinds. I parked and sat in the car for a moment. No sign of movement. No cars I didn't recognize. Still, my gut was screaming. I unlocked the front door and immediately saw it. The hall closet was open and boxes had been dragged out onto the floor. In the kitchen, the cabinet doors were hanging open like someone had been rifling through them. The back door was propped open with a brick. I walked through the house, adrenaline in my throat, phone in my hand. No one was there. But it wasn't random. They hadn't stolen electronics or appliances. What they took was specific. Some of Grandpa's old coin collection, 2 antique rifles that had been mounted above the mantel, and a stack of vintage baseball cards that I had tucked away in the bedroom closet. They knew what they were looking for. I didn't call the police right away. I called my lawyer. Then I pulled up the security footage. The camera by the side entrance caught everything. Zach. And Melanie's husband, Drew. Middle of the night. Gloves. Flashlights. Drew jimmied the lock while Zach stood lookout. They moved quickly, like this wasn't their first time pulling something like this. I watched them walk out with boxes and bags, laughing quietly as they loaded up Drew's truck. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched the video 4 times. Then I forwarded it to my lawyer and to myself. I filed the police report that afternoon. The officer recognized Zach's name before I even finished my statement. Apparently, this wasn't his first brush with questionable behavior. The next 48 hours were chaos. Zach called me 8 times. Melanie sent a long-winded text about how I was blowing things out of proportion and that if I involved the police, I'd ruin what's left of this family. Mom called once, left a voicemail where she cried about how I was breaking her heart and how she couldn't believe I'd go this far over a house. I didn't answer any of them. The police showed up at Zach's place that Friday. A search warrant was executed. Some of the items were recovered. Thankfully, the rifles and most of the coin collection, but a lot was missing. Probably already sold or pawned. Melanie's husband claimed it was a misunderstanding. Zach tried to blame it all on Drew. Didn't matter. I had the footage. I had the will. I had the law. What they didn't know was that this wasn't about the house anymore. This was about respect. And they just handed me everything I needed to teach them what consequences actually feel like. By the time the charges were filed, the family group chat had exploded. Half of them were furious I'd gone to the police. The other half tried to act like it wasn't a big deal, just a family dispute that should have stayed private. But stealing from a dead man's house in the middle of the night wasn't just a family issue. It was criminal. My lawyer filed a restraining order. Zach and Drew were prohibited from setting foot on the property or contacting me directly. Melanie tried to call using a burner number the day after the court date. Voicemail. Straight to evidence. I didn't engage. I didn't need to. Everything was documented now. I had the locks changed again. This time, professionally, deadbolts, reinforced strike plates, and a new security system linked directly to my phone and the local precinct. I installed window sensors, upgraded the exterior lighting, and put a sign out front that simply read, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." A week later, I hosted the estate attorney at the house to officially finalize the transfer of title. While we sat in the study, now clean, warm, repainted, I noticed an envelope tucked between the last few legal folders. It was a letter. From Grandpa. Dated 6 months before he passed. He must have asked the attorney to deliver it once everything was done. Inside was a single page, written in his careful cursive. He said he knew what kind of people Zach and Melanie had become. He said he was proud of me for being steady, loyal, and not letting them drag me down. And then he wrote one line that stuck with me more than anything else. "You don't owe anyone what they refuse to earn." That afternoon, I took his old toolbox from the basement and fixed the warped gate myself. I swept the porch. I planted a few lavender bushes he used to love along the walkway. Then I changed the Wi-Fi password, turned off my phone, and sat in the living room with a cup of tea in silence. The fallout was immediate. Zach lost his job after his employer caught wind of the charges. Drew pled down to avoid jail, but had to pay restitution and serve community service. Melanie tried to play victim online, but people were quick to bring up the footage. My mom stopped talking to me altogether. She sided with them, of course. She always had. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. This house, this space, this piece, it was mine. Not because it was gifted. But because I stayed. I showed up. I did the work they never did. And now, when people drive by the old place and wonder why there's a brand new security gate, freshly painted shutters, and no cars ever parked outside besides mine, it's because the house finally has something it hadn't had in years. A person who actually belongs in it.